In the shadows of Manhattan, Stevens Institute of Technology students in red hats size up, saw, and sand their way to building their sustainable and resilient, or SURE house.
It's being built mostly out of everyday building materials.
It's for the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Decathlon 2015 for universities. 20 teams tasked with building solar-powered houses that are affordable, attractive, easy to live in, and energy efficient.
It's 100% solar powered, as I've mentioned. It's 90% less energy use for heating and cooling because we're air sealing and insulating it so well.
Stevens students designed and built the solar shutters that shade the large windows that can heat the house. The shutters close to guard against 135-mile-an-hour winds, and they have solar panels connected to the water tank, so the sun heats the water even in an extended power outage.
You can still be producing hot water and take hot showers.
The students of Stevens Institute of Technology designed, engineered, and are building this house with not just the Solar Decathlon in mind, but for an horizon well beyond it.
We're really designing this house particularly for the Jersey Shore. That's our target market, but really any coastal area that's susceptible to rising sea levels and increased storm activity, this house is ideal for.
What Sandy did to New Jersey has inspired these students to build a resilient 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with a kitchen, dining area, and living area. A house whose solar system has no battery or diesel backup, but packs a ton of features so it will stand up to nature, its ravages, and its aftermath.
And so after a storm, you're returning back to your home. We're still able to produce standby power that we're charging stations in the home to enable community members to come over and charge their devices after a storm.
It really does have a purpose far beyond just the Solar Decathlon competition.
The designers say the Shore house is 10 times more airtight than the average house, with super floodproofing.
On the exterior, we're putting all sorts of plastic sheathing around that's actually continuous, making it essentially a bathtub.
Because it's waterproof, it's buoyant, so we spend just as much energy holding the house down than we do keeping the water out, so that the buoyant forces of the houses are strong. So in our engineering are the systems that keep the house down when the waters rise. So if we disconnected, it would float.
The Stevens Shore house heads on the highway to Irvine, California next month for the Solar Decathlon in October, and then it will come back to go on the Jersey Shore. This prototype costs about $350,000 to build, but mass-produced would make it a lot less and much more affordable. The young designers and builders see it as necessary, as their intellectual response to Sandy and more.
And so we are trying to start this conversation, and the Solar Decathlon is giving us that opportunity.
In Hoboken, Michael Hill, NJTV News.
Most of which have been unaccounted for, is nonsense. How would we ever make such a decision? All under the guise of, well, we're going to track these weapons and see where they turn up. Well, they turned up where they were supposed to, the drug cartels. And 200 Mexican nationals have died, at least 2 Americans have died. Eric Holder said several things that were interesting. One, I didn't know about it. I didn't get the memo. I got the memo, I didn't read the memo. Now his experience about not reading important documents, like the Arizona immigration law, like he testified before Congress, before us last year. He hadn't read it, started talking about how bad it was. I'm not surprised if he hadn't read the memo, but he knew about it, he was in charge. The second thing he said was that more people are going to die. That's awful. More Mexican nationals, maybe more Americans. And then the third thing he said that I thought was preposterous, I asked him, who was in charge? Who made the decision in our government to do this whole thing of smuggling guns to Mexico? I don't know. He said, I don't know. And here we have almost a year after investigation, the Justice Department, with all their lawyers and all their law enforcement officers, they don't know who made this decision. I think that was a little preposterous that he would make that statement.
Preposterous is exactly the word that was coming to mind for me as well. I just can't believe, with all the investigations that have been done in this, that there's no knowledge about who would have approved such a operation of such magnitude. You know, that you would think there would be very clear delineation of who approved something like that?
Well, the way the federal bureaucracy works, there's a record of everything. You know, you can't order a pencil in the federal government without several people signing off on the paperwork. And to make a statement that he doesn't know who was in charge, so either he did know, or if he didn't know, is there a rogue operation going on in our government that smuggles guns to our neighbors, Mexico? Is that what's going on? And if so, how come it's taken them so long to find out who these rogue moles are that are so insistent in getting these weapons to the drug cartel? And these are not just pistols. These are semi-automatic rifles, and they're sniper rifles. And sniper rifles,
including some 50 calibers,
and 50 caliber weapons as well. So this is very serious. The Mexican government should be rightfully concerned. Americans should be rightfully concerned.
Did the Attorney General speak under oath?
When a person testifies before the Judiciary Committee, by agreeing to testify and signing a form under our rules, that person is under oath. He was not actually sworn in the hearing. That came up in the hearing, but he's considered to be under oath for all the statements he made.
Okay. We have a history, a track record of the Justice Department lying to Congress through the Deputy Attorney General in a letter that he wrote to Senator Grassley, which was later proven to be blatantly false. Did you see anything in the testimony that you felt was false testimony?
Well, the defense was all of the above. You know, it wasn't me. I wasn't there. If I was there, I didn't do it. Yeah, if I did do it, I acted in self-defense. I mean, it held all the defenses. One of the statements that had been made to Congress, the Justice Department withdrew that statement, said it was made in error. They wouldn't say they lied, they just said it was made in error. But we've gotten all kinds of different information. We have subpoenaed numerous documents from the Justice Department about Fast and Furious. We've gotten a little bit. We're going to press that issue. But it's interesting, of the memos that we've gotten, we haven't gotten any from Eric Holder. No emails from Eric Holder. It's from other people, you know, but not Eric Holder.
So he won't release his personal communications on this topic?
Not yet. We're going to press that issue when we go back into session.
How do we move this forward and get some resolution to what really happened with Fast and Furious?
Well, the Judicial Department, or the Judiciary Committee under Lamar Smith will have more hearings. We're going to have more subpoenas. We're going to get these documents. We're going to get them the lawful, legal way. We're going to get the documents. This is not going away. Even though mainstream media doesn't want to talk about this issue, we will get the documents, and we will follow appropriate legal procedures to get the documents. We're going to have more hearings. We'll get to see Attorney General Holder again next year and some of his deputies. And maybe we'll find out who these rogue operatives are.
Now, you have called for the Attorney General's resignation. If this information moves forward in the way that it looks like it's moving forward, hearings against the Attorney General if he refuses to resign?
Impeachment sounds great. It will never work. It takes too long to impeach anybody. By the time the impeachment process took place in the House, the election would be here in November. And realistically, the Senate would never convict and remove Eric Holder from office. It sounds good, but it's not feasible. He needs to immediately resign. And the secondary thing, that the President has to appoint an independent counsel to investigate the ATF and investigate the Justice Department. We're going to get that investigation after the next president is in office. But like I said, impeachment sounds good. There are some that want impeachment. It won't go very far. It takes too long. Unfortunately, it does. But we need to make sure that we hold Eric Holder accountable for these actions.
How do we hold him accountable if he refuses to bring forward the documents that you need to thoroughly investigate?
He can always be held in contempt of Congress. Then it gets real serious. You know, I was a former judge, and when you hold somebody in contempt, you usually get their attention.
You know, it's interesting, the excuses that he gave you probably sounded a lot like things you would have heard when you were a criminal court judge.
Oh yes, those were very similar to excuses, and they were excuses for conduct, improper conduct. The Attorney General is accountable for this action. whether he was in charge, but whether he made the decision or somebody else, he was the man that was in charge of this whole Justice Department and the ATF. He should be held personally accountable for this decision.
What did you learn from the hearings that he came to testify?
He also made a statement during my questioning of him about the operation itself. Did Mexico know about the operation? And he said, well, they may have known about some of it, but they didn't know to this extent. And then he said, I said, would you agree that this was reckless on the part of the Justice Department, reckless conduct? He said, yes, I'd agree that it's reckless. Of course, under Texas law, when you recklessly cause the death of another person, you've committed manslaughter. And I mentioned that to him, so he backed off that a little bit. But this is serious conduct where an operation is reckless. Our government promotes it in a foreign country, and people have died because of American conduct.
In regards to the murder of Brian Terry, what is happening in that case in terms of charges and arrests against people? I know the Justice Department allowed several of the key witnesses in that case to be deported from the country so that they weren't available for questioning.
No kidding. They went back where they came from. This is an old-fashioned law enforcement technique. Now, it is valid generally that they can't give you information because the investigation is ongoing. And I've heard that from peace officers before. Generally, that is true because they're working with witnesses and they're trying to get information from witnesses. But that's what they're saying about this. We can't tell you anything. It's an ongoing investigation. So if they ever complete the investigation, we'll get more information. But here, this has been almost a year, and they can't solve a case in a year. It shows a lack of competence on the part of the Justice Department, if that's true. I suspect they probably know a whole lot more than they're revealing. And it'll eventually occur where they will have to say, we finished the investigation. We'll get all the... I suspect what we're going to find is at least one, maybe two of the weapons found at the scene were those weapons that were part of Fast and Furious that went to Mexico, came back to the United States, and one of them was used to murder Brian Terry.
And also the ICE agent who was killed in Mexico was also related to Fast and Furious?
Yes, Jaime Zapata that was killed, an ICE agent killed in Mexico, who was unarmed when he was ambushed. He and his partner were ambushed. I think the same would be true that a weapon in Fast and Furious was used in that homicide.
Have you had the opportunity to speak to the family of Brian Terry?
Not recently, just last year.
I'm just curious how they're holding up with the strain of this ongoing not knowing really what happened.
I think they are like most victims. They want this thing resolved. They want the truth to come out. And I admire them for pressing the issue, and including the issue of how Brian Terry was armed. It looks like that he had to shoot or did fire bean bags at these drug cartel members, and that may be also partly responsible for how he was not able to defend himself. Now, who made that decision? We hear conflicting information about that.
Now, in regards to that, do you think the reason for that policy might be because of some of the aggressive prosecutions that have happened in the past against Border Patrol agents who've used deadly force weapons in these circumstances?
So we have another one. Agent Diaz has already been prosecuted for being allegedly a little too rough with somebody when he handcuffed him, and so he goes to jail. The drug smuggler goes free. I long thought that the federal government in the Western District of Texas was on the wrong side of the border war in these cases, in that they seem to go after border agents that are trying to protect the country over trying to protect and defend the border agents' actions. They find fault with their actions. And what I've learned and heard about Agent Diaz's actions